everybody, and welcome back to the Star Wars Expanded Universe, narrated by Disney, or from Lucasfilm, whichever way you slice it. Legends. Now, I did not want to rip off Matt Wilkins and or have myself partly shirtless in these reviews, so I did my own thing. Decided to dress up a bit fancier with this shirt that I like a lot and to wear my glasses. So that's what I'm doing because today we are talking about the smooth and debonair Lando Calrissian, specifically the trilogy by L. Neil Smith that came out in the 80s under Del Rey. Reading the first book, Lando Calrissian and the Mindharp of Sharu. Now, with this book, a lot of pretty much every timeline I've seen has placed this after the Han Solo novel by A.C.Crispin, A Hutt's Gambit. However, if I remember correctly, Vufi Ra is in that book with Lando Calrissian. So I think it's a weird thing to put the entire trilogy after that book. So what I did instead was I read the first book, then I'm gonna read Hutt's Gambit, and then the rest of the Lando trilogy because I think to me that just makes more sense. I am gonna kind of combine two reviews. I'm gonna include this, and I'm gonna include the Han Solo book 2 in one video, and I will probably be wearing different clothes because it'll be on a different day. But I just want to make sure that I have this review, fresh in my mind. I don't have any spoilers for you. I did review this book before. This is a reread, of course, which is why I'm also going to include another book in there. That way it's, kind of different. But it's just as good as I remember. I love this Lando book. It is so true, I think, to who Lando is. It like when you read L. Neil Smith's writing of Lando, it feels like Lando, like the character from the movies. Um, I can envision him saying some of these lines, and that's just the amazingness of L. Neil Smith, who also um, recently in the past year or so has passed away, unfortunately. But he was phenomenal with this trilogy. It's really a treat to read these, or at least this first one. Vufi Ra, again, I forgot how amazing of a droid Vufi Ra is. Not to mention with the way the Vufi Ra looks being like original, but also just being a really good character and definitely going to be in a top 10 droids of all time. Like he might be top 3 because he's really good. Um, Lando, the only weird thing in this book is that even though the cover of the book does not make it seem that way, he's not supposed to have a mustache yet because this is early Lando Calrissian, baby, and he doesn't have the mustache yet to the second and third book. But it's really good. I mean, this story's kind of out there. I mean, it's kind of silly and fun, but that's okay because it's not everything has to be super serious and stuff. And I mean, they find the Mindharp of Sharu, which is the most 80s thing I've ever heard, and it has the power to control minds, at least in the system, and all this stuff. And kooky things happen when he reaches the area he's supposed to find it at. Time dilations and people's sizes and just weird wacky 80s stuff, but it works within this story. I think it works fine. I mean, it's a bit more sillier than other Star Wars, but at the same time it has so much love and care put into it that you can't help but love it. And there's no stormtroopers in this either. That's another thing great about it, is that the system that he's in, we have other villains that we're kind of following around, and the Empire's mentioned, because the Empire's around right now, but they're not the threat. We're not seeing stormtroopers left and right attacking people. They're not a part of it. The Empire, besides getting a few mentions, isn't even in the book, which is another great thing. It expands the universe. Remember, this is the 80s. Like what do we have? We had like the 70s Marvel comics, maybe Splinter the Mind's Eye at this point, and Brian Daley's Han Solo trilogy, which I mean, we didn't have that much of an expanded universe yet because Heir to the Empire won't even come out to the 90s. So this is all we had for expanded universe material. And this book is just so much fun. I really, I is it an essential read in your expanded universe journey? No, it's probably not, but it is such a good time, and I do highly recommend it, especially if you like Lando. And even if you don't like Lando, I think you should give these a shot. I think you might really get a kick out of it, and Lando might inadvertently become a favorite of yours. And this is also the one place where we actually get to have some love for Lando, because Lando is always like a side character, but he never really gets his own stories. This is the only time where we get to see it. I mean, this is so early on. Lando has the Millennium Falcon right now. I also love that we can clearly see the contrast between him and Han Solo if you're reading in chronological order. Han Solo's more brash, he's more prone to violence. He's quick on his feet, though, which is the same thing with Lando, quick on his feet, but the difference with Lando is he's not a good fighter. He's not a good pilot. He doesn't like to fight. He doesn't like to pilot. He has his droid pilot for him. He's okay at fighting, but he doesn't like to fight. He prefers talking his way out of things. He prefers, gambling and whatnot. I mean, there's a scene in the book. If you've seen Matt Wilkins' videos, he's talked about it, where all these guys are about to hurt Lando, and then the next chapter begins with Sabak because he convinced everybody to play cards with him instead, and that's Lando in a nutshell. That's who he is. It's that suave and debonair and being all cool and slick like that, and we love Lando for that. We live to see it. The villain of the book, well, there is an overarching villain we'll see throughout the trilogy. He's kind of more in the background in this book. The main villain, I guess, would be the governor of this system that wants the Mindharp for nefarious purposes. Like I said, I think overall it's a really fun little short adventure. I mean, it's only like 130 pages or something like that. Like, it's not a long read, but it's a lot of fun, and I do highly, highly, highly recommend it. No spoilers here. I'm going on to talk about Hutt's Gambit, second book in the A.C.Crispin's Han Solo trilogy. So see you around whenever that is, and I probably won't look so nerdy, but we'll still be talking about some fun Star Wars stuff. Anyway, guys, I'll see you in a second. Bye. Welcome to the second half of the video. Of course, the first half was recorded on a different day when I finished the first Lando book. But here we are today, the second half of the video, with Han Solo, Hutt's Gambit, Book 2 in the A.C.Crispin Han Solo trilogy. I say that because there's two Han Solo trilogies, one from the 80s that came out around the same time as the Lando Calrissian Trilogy by Brian Daley, which we'll get to, but those chronologically happen later. So, but yeah, A.C.Crispin, oh, rest in peace. She's so great. This book is, I mean, I still enjoyed Paradise Snare, but this book is so good. This is the Darth Plagueis of the 90s era of Star Wars in terms of connections. Like, anything that has ever had to do with Han ever is like connected here. We got like, there's this black girl we meet in Dark Empire, who used to date Han or something. We meet her here. Roa from the Brian Daley trilogy, he's here. We got Lando Calrissian and Vufi Ra here. We got the first time that Lando met Han, and the first time that Han met Lando, and also met Boba Fett. Like, there's just so much. I guess, sorry, I'm really excited. I really loved it. This is, of course, a reread, so I'm not going deep into spoilers. But I will say this book meanders. However, the meandering I don't care about. See, because, like, here's the difference between, let's say, Stealth and Siege by Karen Miller versus what A.C.Crispin has done. Because when I read Karen Miller's stuff, it's boring, it's meandering, and it drags because I don't care about it. That being said, there's a good portion in the middle part of the book where Han's just kind of doing stuff. He's going on missions for the Hutts, or he's hanging out with Lando, or he's doing this, or he's doing that, but nothing like integral to the plot is really going on. It's just establishing how he met these people, and these people are going to pop up in other series. We even have a romantic relationship that Han has that doesn't come back till the Crystal Star, the So Bad It's Good book, which I have still yet to read. And I never realized that that's who it was. And now just, but again, the weakest part of this book is probably Han meandering around for the good middle section of the book. However, because it's Han and because of the EU connections, if you care about the EU and you recognize those connections, you're eating every second of that. I should say this book is like 5 years after the last one. We completely skipped over Han and Chewie meeting. Why? Because the story goes, as far as I understand it, that George Lucas always implied, he never said for sure, but he had considered making a story about how Han and Chewie met. And so the EU writers, to be respectful, never broached that topic. Like, so this book talks about how Han shot one of his superior officers with a stun bolt to save Chewie from slavery. But it kind of just glosses over that. And he's like, now this guy won't leave me alone. Chewie's always around. He says he owes a life debt to me. So he's always here. And then by the end of the book, they're kind of like, the duo that you recognize. But it kind of just skips over them initially meeting. But like all the points you need to know are there. But the actual story is not, in case that George ever worked on it. Of course, that didn't happen. But, this book sets up a lot for the third one as well from memory. Bria Theron is back. She's some sort of concubine for an Imperial guy. But is she? Is she actually? That will all be addressed in the final book when we learn what she's all about. I mean, we do know, this book tells us she's a part of this resistance movement on Corellia. However, it's just one sect, because we're 5 years away now from episode 4, so we're ramping up to the Rebel Alliance. And she's a part of the Corellian sector of that. So, and she'll be integral to the Death Star plans, which we'll get into in the next book. But yeah, this book is just phenomenal. The amount of EU connections we get, and it's just another good step for Han Solo. However, the best part of this entire book is actually, I feel, the whole secondary plot going on, which is this kind of like mafia-esque plot between the Hutts, because this book contributed mainly to the most lore we've ever had for the Hutts and like how their crime family organization works. We even have Jabba the Hutt in here and stuff, which is really cool. No mention of his son, by the way, because that's a Filoni thing. You want to know my fan theory for what happened to Jabba the Hutt's baby? Here's my theory, is that he's still around right now. He's like a teenager or whatever, a little Hutt baby boy. And sometime after episode 4, like during the 3 years before episode 5, maybe, think about this, maybe, Bane, the bounty hunter, is still around, and I don't know who orchestrates it. Actually, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about this. Okay, so with everything going on in this book, of course, Jesselik the Hutt and Jabba the Hutt are making plans to kill off other Hutts. Somebody finds out about that. We completely skip over in the next book, of course, because he didn't exist. But you have Bane kill his kid, right? And then you have Boba Fett be hired to kill Bane by Jabba. Boom. There you go. There's your TCW fan fiction from me. I don't know. Anyway, basically, I just want that kid to be dead, which is kind of evil of me. But think about that too, because Jabba's like a big druggie in episode 6, because he's doing a lot of drugs and stuff, which he always indulges. But what if he ramps it up because he's mourning the loss of his son? Think about that one. Anyway, it's stupid. But yeah, overall, this book is just... I went on a complete tangent. I'm so sorry. This book was really, really good. I love A.C. Crispin. it's such a tie between this and the Brian Daley trilogy, because Brian Daley is another case of like just like 80s sci-fi adventure with Han and Chewie acting exactly how they act in episode 4, whereas this we get a more sympathetic, more caring outlook from Han. Not that Han isn't caring in the 80s trilogy, he's just a lot more of that rogue that you see in episode 4. But there's a lot of connections here, and I love EU connections. That's one of the things I thrive. Sorry, it's one of the things I thrive off of in the EU is when I connect all these different things. Um, uh, but yeah, I enjoyed everything with the Hutts. I enjoyed everything with Han meeting characters that we'll meet down the road. Um, and I enjoy the connections with the Lando books too, with having Wulfhy Raw in this book. Lando even gets his signature mustache by the end. Um, but yeah, I I would get into spoilers, but I have already discussed this book elsewhere. Um, oh boy, oh. There's something I'll talk about. Just one thing. The best little cameo that we had in this entire book, which I'll discuss in spoilers. I just want to mention it, but I don't want to say it in the book. I want you to read it. Though, of course, if you're reading this in chronological order, you wouldn't even know who he is. I think this would be the first chronological appearance of him. Possibly. I don't think we've seen him before. Unless I'm wrong. You can correct me in the comments. I think this would be the first chronological appearance. Anyway. Do I think this book is worth your time? Abso-freaking-lutely. Both these books. I know the other video was filmed on a different day. But that Lando book and the Mindharp of Sharu, so much fun. Definitely worth your time. Not to mention, if you read that and then read this, the timeline's kind of wonky because the book kind of starts before the Lando book, then is like after the Lando book, then is like after, like the very end of the book is after all the Lando trilogy has concluded. So it kind of skips over time. But I think it makes sense to read the first Lando book first, regardless, and then you kind of get, you know who Wulfhy Raw is and all that stuff. So, but I absolutely adored this book. And A.C.Crispin, I don't know if I would put this trilogy in like a top 10, but it would most definitely be in a top 20. This book is really good. But both these books are definitely worth your time, and I hope you'll check it out. Until next time, guys, may the Force be with you. For those of you who don't want spoilers, now's your time to leave. 3, 2, 1. He's not a big part of this book. He's definitely more of a cameo. Soontir Fel is in this book. And because I read this chronologically first time through, I didn't know who Soontir Fel was. So it completely went over my head. But I zoomed in on it this time because Fel is such a big name in the EU. I mean, this guy's legacy. This guy would go on to produce Jagged Fel, who would then get married to Jaina Solo, which would then lead to 100 years down the line, or whatever time it was, we'd get the Fel Empire and Legacy Comics like this. Dude, but I haven't even seen the comics with Soontir Fel, so I'm excited to see that. Then we also have like, that, and we have the Crystal Star Lady, and the Dark Empire Lady. Just so many connections in this book. It's insane. But Han definitely wants his freaking Millennium Falcon, but it's not his yet because it's Lando's. But yeah, just seeing Soontir Fel was really cool. But that is all. I just wanted to say that for those who've already read it, because it was, yeah, I loved it. That was my favorite connection that was made in this book, because I didn't realize it the first time because I hadn't read those stories with them in it. So, but I know now, so it was really cool. Anyway, guys, I'm kind of rambling. I'm sorry. This is what happens when I don't do notes, but this is my reread, so I can do what I want. Anyway, I got work soon, so I hope you all have a good one, and I'll see you when we discuss Jabba the Hutt comics, because those exist. Until then.